It's said that in the middle of nowhere is where you'll find the creepiest of things. Today, 5 subscribers sent in their scariest stories that'll surely freak you out. My good friend Mr. Ramsey is helping me out today, so if you enjoy him, be sure to check out his channel in the description down below. If you have a story that you'd like to send in to hear in a future video, be sure to send it to the email or the website that you can find in the description down below. I would love to hear your story. Let's get into these tales of terror. Unknowingly to the naked eye, I'm a private law enforcement officer, in which I enforce state laws underneath independent contact. Unlike public or urban officers who are tax-paid and work underneath the government, think of me as being similar to a personal attorney instead of an appointed attorney, if you were to ever get in a sticky situation. My unnerving doubts about my obscure occupation started 4 years after I regrettably accepted a seemingly simple contact from a middle-aged Eastern male stockbroker who merely requested a private escort across the state in an unmarked vehicle. On the phone, the low-tone man oddly asked only 2 uncomfortable and uncommon questions or requests, which were, may we not take any back roads, and may we not make any stops whatsoever, please and thank you. After he hung up without saying goodbye, I knew right then that this was not gonna be some sort of contact for a novice officer such as myself. But after reviewing the massive payout, $7,000, I would have been a complete fool to at least not meet this shady guy. And to note, I'm no fool. At least I thought so at the time. A couple weeks later, 2 hours before midnight, I alone meet the nerve-shocked guy at an airport approximately 225 miles from his desired destination, which I was unfamiliar with. He did not greet me, nor did he see anything beyond this. Remember our agreement. No back roads and no stops, please and thank you. What the heck was wrong with this guy? Either way, I allowed this weird dude into my unmarked car and we headed off. After about an hour or so, and after turning into our exit ramp, I looked into my side mirrors and saw 2 black and tinted vans ease into my blind spots on my opposite sides. This didn't draw a red flag until I glanced into my rearview mirror and saw the guy, with deep red eyes, oddly leaning downwards in his seat, as if he didn't want to be seen by people in the black vans. After about 5 minutes or so, the black tinted vans kept in pace with us. The guy's phone rang, and shortly after he answered it, he sharply said no. My red flag was up straight up, but not waving just yet, if you catch my drift. But that was short-lived because 6 to 7 minutes later, the guy's phone rung again, yet he refused to answer. And after that moment, the crap began to hit the fan. The van on my left side aggressively sped up until it was ahead of me, and afterward it recklessly cut into my lane before slowing down. This freaked me out so much that I didn't have the chance to notice that the van on my right side had lightly rammed itself into my driver's side, which forced me into the next foremost lane. All the while, the guy's phone is persistently ringing, as if it was possessed. My red flag was waving, like a little punk now. Instead of being forced into the next exit, I slammed on my brakes, with the mindset of escaping the pinning grip of the vans. However, the van on our right side managed to ram the control of the front wheels from me, which sent our vehicle into an intense but controllable spin. I managed to regain control of the vehicle before speeding off into the opposite way of the pursuing vans. As our car sped down the empty highway, I eagerly yelled at the guy, freaking dial 911, but he just sat there in utter shock looking at his possessed phone. So I called 911, and they said to stay on the phone as they dispatched state troopers to our area. However, before I knew it, one of the vans attempted to rear-end our car before the van side-ended us, which was enough to send us off the road, into the quickly approaching deep woods. and therefore forcing me to a sudden stop. The van surrounded and blocked us in, without a way of escape that didn't involve fleeing into the dark, thick woods. Before the van doors opened, I eerily felt an agonizing pop in my ear. The guy in the back seat had shot the rear view window before climbing out and fleeing into the devouring woods. More than a small gang of men were in hot pursuit of the man. As for me, I was dragged out of the car, punched firmly in my side gut, and then ordered to drive away or get beaten. At first, I chose the latter, but after a few more manic gangsters got involved, I wisely chose the smart option. Terrified, I fled along the highway until I met the troopers before heading to the hospital. I told them my entire story and they investigated. A couple of arrests were made, but none of the men arrested were nationals, so they could not be charged with first-degree murder.
Me and my partner are both 26, and this happened about 6 years ago. We both live in northwest of England. At the time we were living in Warrington. Not really the best place to live, but it's a long story how we ended up there, but we ended up going there as a last minute decision. Me and my girlfriend lived in an upstairs flat. At the start, everything was fine. The room downstairs was okay, but a bit strange at first and clearly drank too much at night and slept all day. The couple that moved next door a year after we moved in were alright and we got along just fine. And another couple that moved next door, but one were nice but two-faced, but that doesn't really matter. The flat we lived in, it used to be one house but was converted into two flats. He had the top floor. Our stairs out of the house led onto the backyard area. Our back door faced next door's door, and the crazy woman downstairs door faced out onto the front. So to get from her door to ours, she had to go outside, walk around the house through a large gate and then up a little alleyway to our door. Next door had a large window that looked out into the alleyway. Anyway, the crazy all happened about a year after we moved in. The woman downstairs was in her late 40s, but the drugs she did made her look a lot older. It all started when someone started to scratch my car every night. We would go to bed, wake up, and someone would have scratched my car. We didn't know who it was at the time, so we asked neighbours and no one knew. We started to call the police to set a police log and hopefully they would do more patrols in the area, but they didn't. Every night the same would happen. Sometimes we waited up and nothing would. One night we were in bed and the woman downstairs started screaming, "Help!" "Fine, call the police." She was shouting as if she'd lost it and we thought maybe someone was hurt. She was screaming for like half an hour and I had to be up early for work. Me and my missus thought she needed the police to help, so we called them and they turned up, but she went quiet. The following day after I got home from work, the woman downstairs went out and gave me the death stare as she left. I went upstairs and didn't think anything more about it. Later that night, there was an almighty crash downstairs. Someone had smashed downstairs windows. A couple of days later, after her windows were fixed, we went into the backyard to let our little dog out, where we were outside for about 20 minutes, and then the crazy woman poked her head out the window and said, "I hope your dog has eaten the poison I have put in the bread for you, you dirty fucking scumbags." We picked our dog up and went in. Luckily enough, she never eats anything she finds outside. We didn't take her threat seriously. The following day, the next door's dog got really sick for no reason, apart from that they had eaten the bread that someone had been putting out. We didn't find this part out until later. They were okay about a week after. All went quiet for about a week. The next door neighbour came home in his work van and parked it at the front of the flat one night, and someone scratched the word scumbag into the side of it. They knew it was the woman downstairs, as she had been arguing with them for a while apparently. The following night she got worse. She spent ages getting stoned and smoking, so much the smell was coming up through our floorboards. We went to bed as I had to be up for work at 9. Later that night, she and her guy friend came outside screaming and shouted up at our flat so loud it woke us up. They were screaming horrible things at us and threatening to kill us, and naturally we were scared, so we called the police. They came and took the guy home and told her to go to bed. After they left, we were going back to sleep when all of a sudden we hear a banging on the door. So I got up slowly and went to the door in the dark. There was no way I was opening the door at this time of night, and I looked through the spy hole and couldn't see anyone. Then I heard, "Open up please, it's PC Jones Warrington, police." I was about to open the door when all of a sudden she came to the door and banged again. This time I could see who it was, and guess what? It wasn't the police. After about 20 minutes of this happening, she stopped with the whole "it is the police" thing and started shouting threats at us through the letterbox. I sat at the top of the stairs and recorded everything she said on my phone. She even said, "I won't scratch your car, but I know someone who will, and they will come round and pay you a visit." Then she went quiet for about 5 minutes, then started again. This happened all night. The following morning, the real police came out to us and they wanted to question me, wanting to know why I had attacked the woman from downstairs and wanted to know why I had smashed her face into the wall. I was shocked and had no idea what they were on about. I played them the recording from last night and then they left to continue their investigations. As they left, the couple next door came out and asked if they could have a word with the police officer about what happened last night. Apparently when the woman was going crazy, they were in the kitchen and had a front row seat. In the 5 minutes she went quiet, she walked to the side of the door and hit her own face against the brick wall and then carried on shouting. But after each time she closed the letterbox, she would hit her face against the wall again and again. Safe to say the police were as shocked as I was. 2 nights later, I was in work. At about 10ish, she came outside and my missus called me and said, "Don't come home yet, the woman next door was out on her phone talking to someone and walking around our flat pointing up and taking photos." My missus had no idea why. All she kept saying is, "I know she's up there alone right now and I will help you get rid of her. It would be easy." As soon as I pulled up, she ran back in. A few nights later, she got a big Rottweiler of someone for, in her own words, protection. That same night, she got into an argument with the guy next door. So she opened the door and said, "Go on boy, get him, get him." The dog then ran out and licked him. Safe to say she wasn't too pleased. Later that night, there was a German Shepherd and his owner walking past when the woman downstairs opened the door again and let the dog run out for no reason. It attacked the German Shepherd and locked its jaw around the dog's neck. She ran back in and locked the door and left the dog there. It took 5 people to pull these 2 dogs apart and find out where the dog came from. The German Shepherd's neck was a bad mess. A few nights later, she got rid of the dog. I was upstairs in the kitchen one night with the lights off, on my phone. It was winter and there was a little snow on the ground. I heard her slam her door, then watched her as she walked up on the road and turned around and looked up at her kitchen window. She then walked over to my car and pulled out her keys and ran them all along up one side, and then she went and walked around into the middle of the road, looked up at the kitchen again, checked for cars coming, then did the same down the other side of my car. My jaw dropped as I watched this unfold. When I snapped back to reality, I realised what I had just seen, and I ran downstairs so angry and my blood pumping so fast I was shaking. However, All that was left of her when I reached my car was her bike tracks where she had left. My girlfriend made me calm down and to not do anything crazy. So naturally I called the police again and they came out, took down what I said and just told me unless she admitted to doing it, there wasn't a lot they could do. All I could do was find out how much it would cost to get my car fixed, and if she admitted what she had done, they could try and get her to pay. Long story short, to get my car fixed it would have cost over £3,000. I never got it fixed and she never admitted to it. Not long after this, we moved out and lived with family for a couple of months, just until we found somewhere else. We couldn't take it anymore and we moved our stuff out into a van with the help of family. She sat in the bedroom looking out the window at us every now and again, like she had done nothing wrong. This woman was totally crazy. When I was growing up, I didn't think anyone was that bad and that everyone should be given a chance. But this woman changed everything I believed in. Just as a word of warning to everyone, never trust your next door neighbour because you never really know what is going on behind closed doors.
So before I start, I should let you guys know that this is completely true, as I have no reason to lie. This house is on the border of North Carolina and Virginia, but for the sake of my family's privacy, I won't state exactly where. It's safe to say that I was in the middle of nowhere, with no neighbors, no stores, or paved roads, for 30 miles at the very least. Anyways, on with the story. I had been on a 2-month-long trip to England, taking time off from life. While I was gone, my father had purchased an old farmhouse down in the country as a getaway place. Only a week after I had arrived home, I made plans to go check out the house. About another week later, I realized exactly how far out the house was from everything. It was a bit unnerving, but I brushed it off and made myself enjoy the drive. But from the exact moment I exited my car in the driveway of that house, I felt as if I was being watched. I lugged my bags into the house and started looking around, checking out the rooms and the outside deck. After exploring, I settled in for the night, and nothing happened. Actually, for the first time in 3 days, nothing happened at all. Everything seemed normal, besides the feeling of something watching you constantly. It was on the 4th day, late in the evening, that I would finally find out what was watching me. I had just finished eating dinner and was at my sink, starting to wash my dishes. As I looked out the window, I saw a coyote standing in the tree line about 30 yards away. It was standing on its hind legs, with its right paw against a tree like it was propping itself up. I froze, not really out of fear, but shock. I had no idea what I was seeing. I was never the outdoors type, but I knew coyotes did not do this. I finally snapped out of it and walked out to the patio doors to the deck to get a better look. As I walked outside, I noticed that it had lowered its paw and was now just standing with its nose in the air like it was smelling. Now this is where things get really crazy. All of a sudden, after about 6 seconds of me staring at it, it lowered its head and started running straight towards me. Now, I know this sounds unbelievable, but it's true. Like some sort of cartoon. It was running on its back legs as fast as a coyote would. I was startled, and all I could say, "What the heck are you?" before it started scrambling up the steps, falling in its hurry to get up them. I ran back inside and slammed the patio door shut behind me. Through the long plastic blinds on the door, I could see it. It was standing on all 4 legs, just staring at me, seemingly smiling. I yelled at it and told it to freak off, but it didn't move or change. Its expression stayed the same. I went to the furthest room from the door and tried to forget about it, telling myself anything that would make me feel better. After about an hour, I was calm enough to exit the room, but as soon as I did, I hear it. It was mocking me, over and over, in a raspy voice that sounds kind of like a grown man trying to learn English. The words are jumbled at first, but become perfectly clear by the 5th or 6th time I heard it. All I can do is just stand still and try to locate where it's coming from, and I finally do. It's coming from the patio door, the same door it was earlier. I creeped over to the door, and as gently as I could, peeled one of the plastic blinds aside. What I saw changed everything. I was looking towards the ground, expecting to see a talking coyote. Instead, in the dim light shining over from behind me, I saw a man, standing a solid 1.5 feet taller than me, with white skin, covered by what looked to be like deer fur. Its eyes were all white, almost bright enough to shine in the darkness. It stared at me with its head tilted to the side for a few seconds, then yelled, seemingly louder than any noise I've ever heard. It was loud enough to leave my ears ringing. Stunned, I walked backwards towards the kitchen as he slammed his hands against the glass sliding door, hard enough to start sending cracks through the entire door. Seeing this, my flight or fight instinct kicked in. He was between my car and myself, so there was no escape, which meant I was fighting. All I had were some flares from the roadside emergency kit and a fillet knife from the kitchen. Those would have to work. Just as I started to devise a plan, the patio door shattered, the sound of glass falling as all I could hear, as I was expecting to see this thing come through the broken door. But, oddly enough, it just stood outside the door, as if some sort of force was keeping it from coming in. I cracked a flare and threw it through the door, attempting to try to ward this thing off. As the flare landed beside it, it broke eye contact with me. I knew that moment was my last hope to charge it with the knife. If I die, at least I'll go without a fight. As I got within a few feet of it, it turned and disappeared behind the flame, burning bright and loud. Through the shine of the moonlight, I could see it walking across the yard towards the tree line. As it walked, it slowed as its human body cracked and morphed into the exact shape of a white-tailed deer. As it vanished into the forest, I felt sick before I could even think what I was looking at. Suddenly I was doubling over, puking and crying my eyes out. After a few minutes I put myself together, grabbed my car keys, my phone, and left without getting any of my bags. It was a 10-hour drive home, and I made it in less than 8. My family was surprised to see me back home, and after I explained everything, they acted like I was crazy. That was until they saw that I didn't have my bags and how it said I was. My father decided that he would wait until morning to go back and I would show him. That night I did not sleep. I could only sit on my bed and scour the internet to find something about what I saw. That's when I stumbled upon reports of skinwalkers in the national forest an hour away from the house. Now, until the second time I encountered this creature, I wasn't sure if I was crazy or not. I've encountered this thing 4 times now, and I plan on sharing those with you guys as well.
This happened when my dad was 16, all the way back in 1976. Him and my uncle Nigel were very outgoing and liked to explore to keep themselves occupied. When the summer of '76 came around, my dad finished school. He wanted to do one big bit of adventuring before he began work. The Pennine Way. For those who do not know, the Pennine Way is a 270-mile walkway in Britain that, depending on which way you walk, starts in just south of Scotland and basically cuts through the middle of England and finishes in the Midlands. It usually takes around a 3 to 4 week walk. With a long summer to fill, my dad and 15-year-old Uncle Nigel and my dad's friend Russ were dropped off in Scotland by my great-grandfather to begin their hike. The first week went swimmingly. They met some nice locals who even cooked them food and gave them room to sleep in, and generally enjoyed this whole new level of freedom entrusted upon them. They mainly camped in clear areas, but one day, they decided to cover an extra 5 miles in order to reach a village as they needed to buy some more food and get spare tents. They stumbled into a village around 6 p.m. and saw the local pub was opening. After relaxing in the pub with some drinks, my dad tells me that the owner probably knew they were underage, but wanted all the business they could get. The owner offered to let the guys camp out in the back field of their pub. The landlady/wife said the owner seemed oddly hesitant at first, looking a bit concerned and having a bit of a word with her husband in private. However, Yorkshire hospitality seemed to override any doubt she had after a night of heavy drinking with the locals. They recited to their tent. My dad says they were using an oil lantern hooked to a center of the tent as a light source, and when they turned it off, they left it hanging, which is important, not only for what happened next, but also what happened the next day. My dad woke up and turned off the oil light while debating to get up and having a piss in the field, seeming as the owners had been nice in letting them camp out there, when he heard a door creak open from the creak shut. There were no footsteps, so my dad had to put it down to an old shed or something. After a few seconds, however, the sound of feet landing on grass became progressively audible until they stopped right outside the tent. My dad thought it was the owner checking in on us, and he went to unzip the tent. The owner fully unzipped it. My dad said the weird thing about this was that he didn't have a shirt on, just some slippers and night trousers. After my dad asked what was doing, he stuttered out some excuse about hearing a growl and went to check if the boys were okay and safe. There was no growl, as the only sound in the last 5 minutes was the door, the footsteps, and the unzipping of the tent. The guy weirdly emphasized the need for a good sleep before hiking and intrusively tapped on the oil light, asking for it to be turned off. He walked off, letting off a frustrated sigh and nearing the house and closed the door behind him. Morning comes and the owner's wife makes the boys some breakfast while they pack up their stuff. The owner takes down the tent for them and takes off somewhere in his 4x4 without coming back to the house. They thank the woman and tell her husband thank you as well. She says that when she figures out when he comes back, that he will tell him. They come to their designated camping spot, just next to a small stream, around an hour and a half early, and decide to have a longer rest after walking around 130 to 140 miles over the past 8 to 9 days. They pull out the tent and find lots of small holes, all about a pen's width and wide. What's weird about this is my dad described the size of it as holding a pen while telling me this. Everyone looks confused, and my dad rationalizes this by the man telling him about an animal last night. It must have come back and nibbled on the tent. Yes, that explains it, sure. Russ suggests they walk back to a different village around 2 miles back and try to get another tent. They leave the now useless tent as a marker for their site and walk back to the village. To their luck, a shop clearly targeting walkers is open. Unfortunately, they didn't have any tents, but they decide to buy tape and cover the holes for tonight and hope to find a new tent somewhere soon. When walking back, the sun had begun to set and it was quite dark. Moonlight mainly guiding them back down the path. When they returned to their site, they couldn't believe it. Their tent was set up for them, but it was on fire, completely engulfed in flames. They threw the water in their bottles over the tent and used the stream water to fill them and eventually doused the fire. When they looked inside the tent, their oil lamp glass had been smashed and someone had followed them, set up their tent, and waited for them to return before smashing the oil lamp and, in turn, lighting up the tent in flames. My dad told me that there really isn't an explanation except for the pub owner. He was stopping doing whatever he was planning on doing with my dad being awake and decided to take some fucked up form of revenge by sending a message. At first, I totally didn't believe my dad and thought he was trying to scare me, but upon referencing the burning tent incident in a phone to my Uncle Nigel, he instantly started rambling about how weird it was. My Uncle Nigel does not lie. I went camping with 3 of my buddies, John, Bennett, and Kyle. We do this every year. It's kind of a bro trip to reconnect with each other. We were all fresh out of college and decided to go to our yearly camping trip in August. We are from Oregon and ended up camping in the woods there like we usually do at the same point. The first day was great. We set up our spot, explored the area, and by the time the sun was setting, we set up a campfire and made dinner. After a few too many beers and some s'mores, we decided to go to sleep. It was a perfect way to end the day. Our second day was basically the same thing. Hiking, food, one too many beers. But this night, we ended up being not so perfect. I remember watching some videos on YouTube, and we were laughing and it was interesting. As we finished the rest of the beers, we were wrestling around with each other like guys do, and John stopped messing around and froze. Everyone was confused, but John claimed he heard something nearby. I told him it was most likely a squirrel, and he said, no, it was most definitely not. He was scaring me at this point, and I decided to resume the tackling session and I took him down. We forgot about the whole thing until about 10 minutes later. We were tired from wrestling and joking around, so we decided to put the fire out and head into the tent. We had a 6-person tent for anybody wondering, so we were all in one tent. Just as our only light source besides our flashlights went out, I heard a slight cackle. I assume it was one of those boys because we were all clearly a bit buzzed, so everything is fine. I wanted to see what was so funny, so I turned the flashlight directly into Bennett's face. I thought he was the one laughing. Bennett's face was white as a ghost. He looked at me and said, "Did you guys hear that?" I said, "The laughing?" And Kyle said, "That wasn't you." We were all shaken and decided to go into the tent, silent. As we got into the tent, I pulled out an axe that I used to cut the wood. It was the only source of protection we had. I was on the very end of the tent with Kyle and John, and in the middle was Bennett. We were all silent, but I knew we were all wide awake after hearing the laughing. We weren't exactly at an actual campsite, where there were other people around. We just walked into the woods, found an open spot and set up camp here. We were about a mile from our car with barely any cell signal, so I guess you could say we weren't exactly in the safest position if there was a crazy maniac around. I got tired, so I dozed off. I have no idea how long I was sleeping before I heard laughing again. It's hard to describe other than it sounded menacing. It was frozen, and I didn't move. I didn't even try to look over to see if my buddies were awake. The axe was under my pillow. As I mustered enough strength to move to get the axe, I saw what looked like someone's finger pressed up against the tent, circling around the tent. Someone was definitely outside, walking around our tent, laughing. When they got to the front part of where the tent entrance was, they stopped. About 5 seconds went by before the person furiously shook the tent and screamed. That's when I knew my buddies were awake as well, because Kyle screamed like a little girl right after. Whoever was behind the tent laughed and again walked off. We laid there the rest of the night, wide awake and definitely sober. We didn't want to move out of pure fear that whoever was out there was still there. When the sun came up, we packed up everything and walked back to our car. We still go camping every year, but this time we go to legit camping sites. I now bring a judge or a gun with me, and not just an axe. Whoever was outside our campsite could have easily been a deranged homeless person, psychopath serial killer, meth head, or just an asshole playing a prank on us. But I sure as hell won't camp in a rural place anymore. Stay safe out there. It's a dangerous world we live in.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that thumbs up, as it helps this video reach more people. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a new video. I upload videos like this one almost every single day. Much thanks to my friend Mr. Ramsey for reading story number 2. It really helped me out a lot, and I'd appreciate it if you'd go to the description below and check out his channel. I think you'll enjoy his channel. If you have a story that you'd like to hear in a future video, be sure to send it to the email or the website that you can find in the description down below. I also have links to the new merch that you can find that are based off series that you find on this channel, as well as other important things like my Twitter, Facebook, etc. See you guys soon with another creepy video.